it was very vulnerable, and I think I get very emotional thinking about it. And I think the best part of it is that the team was so inspired by it. The team was so.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the LeadHer Lounge. I'm Taylor Miller-Goulet.
And I'm Erika Rivera, and this is the space where modern leaders come for fresh and practical takes on leadership. Welcome!
Today, we are going to dive into the topic of inclusive leadership, and I want to add a little bit of a disclaimer because inclusive leadership falls under that umbrella of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and this is something that we can't fit into a 10 to 15 minute YouTube episode, so just know that we're going to dive into some personal experiences and talk about why inclusive leadership is super important on your teams and how it can create more engagement and happier teams as well. So the first thing that I like to kind of think about when I'm thinking about it, am I being inclusive, is the simple question of, am I including everybody on my team in some capacity? And I think a really easy way to do that is to do what's called seeking out the silent. And that means, who's the quietest person on your team? Who's the person that maybe participates the least amount, or the person that seems the least engaged or bought into the whole thing? And how can you bring them in and make them feel included in some way? So a good way to do that is get to know them. Shocker, I know we talk about that all the time, is getting to know your team members, but truly get to know more about them, their likes, their dislikes, and how they want to be included on the team. And sometimes a lot of team members will just want to come in and do their job and leave. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we do want to make sure that they're getting the most out of their experience. So there might be something else that's available to them, whether it's maybe they're leading a morning huddle or introducing a topic that they're really passionate about to the team, or sharing a little bit about their unique cultural background or community that they're from, so that the team can learn a little bit more about them as well. So with that being said, we are going to dive into some experiences and some inclusive leadership examples that we have of our own. And I'd love to start with asking Erika a little bit about your experience with coming to the U.S. You are originally Colombian, lived in South Korea for several years, and you've been in the U.S. for 5 years. So tell us a little bit about your transition.
Yeah, so personally, it was a very challenging experience to move to the US. I was living in South Korea. I was learning Korean language. I was also speaking in Spanish. It's my first language. So I had to come to the US and not just speak English, but perfect English in a professional setting. So personally, it was hard, right? Challenging, because of course I wanted to speak the language properly and communicate properly as well. But with my team and my leaders, it was such an amazing experience, because as soon as I talk, everybody knows that I'm not from the US. Everybody knows that I'm coming from somewhere else. At the time, it was very frustrating, to be honest, to have to explain myself. But now I love it and I embrace that. So of course, everybody noticed that, and my leaders were so supportive. Not just my leaders, but my team was so supportive, especially the last team that I was in. They was part of as well. They just wanted to learn about me. I think the best way to kind of approach these type of situations, again, with curiosity. You don't need to know about Korea and Colombia and know how to approach me. No, just ask me. Whatever you want to learn about that team member, just go and ask that person. That person is going to feel so special, and it's so wonderful to know that people really want to approach you in a correct way, and they want to kind of empower where you're coming from. So that's what you all did. Everybody did that, and they even celebrated holidays or congratulated me for holidays I didn't know about.
Colombia has a lot of holidays.
Yes, Pretty much every Monday.
More than the US.
Yeah, so they did that because they researched.
Yeah.
Like now we have technology to learn. Now we have people to learn from. And it wasn't just because of the leader, the inclusive leader, it's because it was about my team as well. And I think that is because this specific leader created that space for everybody to be also curious and wanting to learn, that everybody was that way.
Yeah, I think that's such an amazing and happy story.
Yes.
And it is, I'm really happy that
I feel lucky. I feel lucky.
Yeah, you really are. And there's so many experiences that team members have where they might feel like they are excluded quite often because they're culturally different from the rest of their team. So we tend to prefer people that are like us. They speak the same language as us, they have the same traditions as us, and that can actually be favoritism, which we talked about before in an earlier episode. But you can actually tend to exclude people that don't speak the same language as you, or avoid speaking to them because you're not sure if they're going to understand you or if you're going to understand them. And it's just a very sad way to approach, especially leadership. So being very open-minded and being very curious towards others to learn more about them, as opposed to trying to avoid what you might think is an awkward conversation. Just know you're hearing it here. Ask the questions, get to know the people. People want to talk about themselves and share more about themselves too.
And when this happens, somebody that felt that needed an inclusive leader, you feel that you are more, like you have more opportunity to offer different opinions, because you know that diverse thinking is appreciated by your team and your leaders as well. So there is going to be such a beautiful way to collaborate with these individuals, because they're going to feel like heard, they're going to feel that they have a space, and not just a space, but the opportunity to talk and the opportunity to actually impact.
Yeah, the team with that diverse perspective.
Yes.
Another thing I want to touch on, though, too, and we're going to discuss, because you've got a great story for this, is that inclusivity in general, and even diversity in general, isn't just related to cultural differences. It can be differences, in anything, honestly, the way that you think, your background, the community that you come from. You can have diversity if someone lives in California and someone lives in Michigan. You probably think and have different life experiences. So I would love to hear, Erika's got a great story, and a little bit of a humble brag for how amazing of an inclusive leader you were, because you had a transitioning team member. So let's talk about your experience.
Let's talk about it. Yes. So the second time I led a team, I have this team member for over 3 months, I believe. And they approached me and they shared with me that they were transitioning, and they were changing their name, and their pronouns were going to be they and them. I was honored that they came to me to share such a beautiful change in their lives, an important change, and that they trusted me with that information.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know how to approach that with the rest of the team. I didn't know if they wanted me to approach that conversation. So what did I do? I asked them. I asked them what did they want me to do. And they shared with me that they love the team and they wanted to share that. Of course, it's a big news, and they wanted to, like, their team to call them by their new name and utilize their pronouns as well. I opened the floor for them to share this new change in their lives, and I told them that I was there to support them. Anything that they needed from me, I was there for them. But they pretty much on that meeting, meaning they brought a PowerPoint. They explained their new pronouns, why is this happening, or why they feel this way, and they wanted to share with everybody in the team and why it's important for them, and their new name, and they opened the floor for questions as well.
Yeah,
kind of like a Q&A.
Yeah, that is such a cool and vulnerable thing for them to do, but that is a really beautiful thing to share.
Yes, it is beautiful. It was very vulnerable, and I think I get very emotional thinking about it. And I think the best part of it is that the team was so inspired by it.
Yeah.
The team was so inspired that now everybody was being vulnerable about different things. Not in that moment was for them.
Yeah.
But in the future, in future meetings, everybody was sharing important things, things that were very personal. And I think this helped the team to really create such a beautiful environment and trusting and the trusting and caring team that I was always aiming for.
That's awesome.
Just because I opened the floor, just because I asked the right questions, just because I was curious, just because they felt that I was supporting them, and maybe if they needed me, they knew I was there right by them. For anything, for any, maybe if we have a team member that wasn't accepting this or maybe didn't understand what was happening, I was there for them. That, thank God, didn't happen. Everybody was just so happy, and it was such a graceful experience. I think
it's such a beautiful thing when people come together and embrace that vulnerability, and it builds more camaraderie, it builds more trusting, and as a leader, you're creating so much more inclusivity on your team, and people are going to be comfortable to literally just be themselves. And that authenticity piece that we talk about all the time with our three-legged stool is not just for leaders, it's for people too. We want our teams to be very empathetic, authentic, and hold people accountable as well, and that authenticity piece is so important. But thank you so much for sharing your stories with this inclusive leadership episode. There's tons of more content for inclusive leadership, so if you are curious, please check out our website. We have a ton of offerings that you could implement on your teams too, if you wanted to check out some of the products that we have. And if you've got any experiences with inclusive leadership on your own, or if you have an inclusive leader who you just want to give a shout out to, let us know in the comments. And obviously, as always, be sure to subscribe so you can continue getting more content from us here at the LeadHer Lounge.
So we'll see you next week, leaders.
Bye.